Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. I started my reading week with The Life to Come by Michelle de Krester. This is an Australian novel, mostly set in Sydney, New South Wales. However, there is a chunk of the novel set in Paris. There are significant flashback scenes to Sri Lanka, and there are significant scenes set in Indonesia and Romania. The Life to Come is a novel in 5 parts, and one character holds these 5 parts together, and that is the author Pippa Reynolds. The novel takes place over the course of about 15 to 20 years and begins when Pippa is a student and a housing issue forces her to temporarily move in with her professor George, who is both of them are aspiring authors and both eventually have a middling reputation. The second part of the novel is the story of Pippa's friend Cassie's relationship with a man of Sri Lankan descent named Ash, who is a professor of politics. And so this part tells the life of this relationship as well as bits of Ash's life before and after. The third part is set in Paris and is about a French-Australian translator who meets Pippa at a function at the Australian embassy while Pippa is in France researching a new novel. The fourth part is Pippa's story itself, from the early days of her marriage to when she's working on her French lessons, the novel set in part in Paris, and then a later novel. And then the fifth and final part is about a Sri Lankan Australian named Krester, who lived in the house next door to Pippa and her husband Matt during the time of French lessons, the French novel, and her next book, which was her breakout hit. And this part deals a lot with Christabel's life in Sri Lanka, moving to Australia, and her relationship with Pippa and how it sours. And I loved the novel. I really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed the critique of the performative aspects of Pippa and her life and her actions. She very much gains a lot of friends, but it's an exploitative relationship that's often meant to sort of elevate her rather than genuinely being kind. An example is in her section. She fears that don't quite remember what her job is, but her husband's family has befriended an Iraqi Australian who is subject to a racist attack. And Pippa wants to take some flowers and try to cheer her up, but she's put out because she can't do what she present the flowers in the way that she wanted to do, which would make her look good. So that was interesting. I really just enjoyed all of the book. It was amazing. So, from Monday through Wednesday, I read volumes 76 through 78 of One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. So this is where I'm going to have a bit of a problem because we're 78 volumes into One Piece, and how do I condense all of that down into a reasonable amount? I will try. So, One Piece is the story of a young man named Monkey D. Luffy, who is this kid here. When he was a child, he was a mascot for a crew of pirates captained by red-haired Shanks. On one of the red-haired pirates' last visits to his hometown, Luffy eats a devil fruit. Fruit that gives its consumer superhuman abilities. In Luffy's case, it transformed him into a rubber man. Think Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four, although Luffy's abilities are significantly stronger than Mr. Fantastic. 10 years later, Luffy leaves his hometown to go out onto the seas and become a pirate, looking for the One Piece, a fabled treasure of Goldie Roger, the Pirate King, that its discoverer will become the new Pirate King. So over the course of Luffy's early adventures, he slowly builds a crew and gains a ship. These first crew members are Zolo, who's the second in command. I'm not seeing Nami, who's the navigator. Usopp, who is the lookout, comic relief. And Sanji, the cook. Also, at this time, they get a ship called the Merry-Go. So at this point, their adventures are in the East Blue. So the world of One Piece is divided by two major geographic features. One is the Red Line, an artificial continent that spans the world in a thin ring. And the Grand Line, which is a body of water bordered by two calm belts where most of the action in this world takes place. So after this initial crew is formed, Luffy and his Straw Hat Pirates move to the Grand Line. The Grand Line itself is divided into two. Paradise, which is the first part of the Grand Line, and where the Straw Hats add Tony Chopper as the ship's doctor. He is also not on any of these covers. As the ship's doctor, Nico Robin, this character here as the ship's archaeologist, Frankie, this character here as the shipwright of the crew, and Brooke as the ship's musician. He is a living skeleton. And at this point, the Merry-Go sustained so much damage that it was no longer seaworthy. So Frankie built a new ship called the Thousand Sunny, which is the Straw Hats ship from that point onward. So after adventures in Paradise that ultimately led to the crew being separated for 2 years to train and get ready for the second half of the Grand Line, the New World. And it's there that the Straw Hats immediately come into conflict with Don Quixote do Flamingo. Do Flamingo is a warlord of the sea, an official pirate who works as a privateer. He targets other pirates. Doflamingo also has underworld connections unknown to the world government. As Joker, he is involved in the slave trade, in the drug trade, in the arms trade. He also works as a subordinate of Kaido, one of the 4 emperors of the New World, 4 incredibly powerful pirate captains. Early in the Straw Hats' stay in the New World, they form an alliance with Trafalgar Law, this guy here, to take down Doflamingo as an opening move against Kaido. However, Law has his own agenda and his own primary target, which is Doflamingo. So things don't go well. And also, in addition to Doflamingo's many jobs, he's also the usurper king of Dressrosa. And so the Straw Hats and Law kind of infiltrate Dressrosa, and things go to hell in a handbasket, and the crew is separated. At this point, the Straw Hats and Law have joined with the Tontatas, species of little people who live on Dressrosa, the gladiators of the Colosseum, the army of the former dynasty of Dressrosa, and eventually the entire citizenry of Dressrosa have allied to take on Doflamingo and his pirate crew. And it's a complicated battle because there's a lot of moving pieces. Gradually, Luffy and Law take on Doflamingo. Zoro takes on Pika, which is this dude here. And a bunch of other fights are going on. And eventually this batch of volumes end with Luffy and Doflamingo fighting. This is the final battle where everything will be decided. So what did I make of these 3 volumes? In a way, I both enjoyed it. It had been several months since I last read One Piece, so when I read volume 76, I was happy to be back in this world. But 77 was a bit of a letdown, and while 78 was an improvement, I still felt a little let down. In part, I think Nami, Chopper, and Brook are completely absent, and Sanji are completely absent from these volumes. Also, I forgot to mention, the Straw Hats have also formed a partnership with some samurai from Wano, where Kaido is in charge. And one of these samurai, a young boy named Momonosuke, is also missing from these volumes, although his chief retainer is a major character, or he's there. So I enjoyed some of the fights, particularly Franky's fight with Senor Pink, and Zolo's fight with Pika, even if that took about 3 volumes or more, and probably could have been done significantly quicker. And I'm also rather enjoying Luffy's fight with Doflamingo, even though, again, it probably could be shorter. I much prefer shorter fights rather than longer, drawn-out fights. Usually what happens in these fights is the antagonist will will dominate the first round. And then the protagonist will make a comeback. And then the antagonist will take the fight back over. And then the protagonist will get a victorious win and win. Although sometimes the antagonist will actually pull out the win. So by the time I finish the volumes, the fight between Luffy and Doflamingo is still ongoing, with Doflamingo beginning to make his villainous second wind, I guess you could say. So I don't quite know what I make of my response to this. I have been feeling since the beginning of the year that my interest in manga is starting to wane, and I think I definitely felt that with these 3 volumes. So yesterday I read Deer Trails by Kim Shuck. Kim Shuck is a San Francisco poet who was for years the poet laureate of San Francisco. She is still very much involved in the San Francisco poetry scene as the facilitator, the program director of Kim Shuck's Poetry Jam with the San Francisco Public Library, which is a poetry reading series that the San Francisco Public Library puts on every month and is available on YouTube, usually several months lately, on the San Francisco Public Library's YouTube channel. I'd been wanting to read Kim Shuck's work for quite some time, and I picked up this volume a few months ago, or maybe sooner than that. And I read it, and her work is okay. It doesn't really scream to me as something that I'm particularly enamored of. So I liked it, but I don't think Kim Shuck is one of my favorite poets. So, what will I be reading this coming reading week? Since I've pretty much talked myself into a depression. So today I'm going to start on Cloudstreet by Tim Winton. This is a novel about 2 families who move into a dilapidated mansion and interact with each other over the years, and they're 2 very different families. Depending when I finish Cloudstreet, I don't know if I will return to One Piece and read from volume 79 to 81, which will at some point finish off the Dressrosa saga and move on to the next story arc. And then if I have some extra time, I might get to some poetry, namely The End of the Clockwork Universe by Fleda Brown. It's one that I would like to get to immediately, although I also just hauled 4 new poetry collections, so I might also move to them. But that's my plan for this coming week. So while I'm loading this up, I will go ahead and put the new books that I have hauled so far in April onto the shelves. So today I finished my 2026 library tour, and that means I can move my fiction, poetry, and drama collection a bookcase. Over here I have what is right now an empty bookcase that I'm going to sort of move my fiction, poetry, and drama to, so that way I will have a free bookcase at the end rather than at the front. Anyway, BookTube, that's all I have for today and for this week. I will be back next week, hopefully with more videos than just my May reading plan and weekly reads, but we shall see. I'm also thinking about maybe taking most of the week off. I haven't quite decided whether there are some discussions or what I want to do. So anyway, until I see you next time, thank you, BookTube, and have a great rest of your day.